Welcome to Transformational Pathways, a podcast created by Toastmasters District 46 in the greater New York area, where we share conversations from influencers within the Toastmasters community and people whose lives have positively transformed by walking down the Toastmasters path. Whether you're just getting started in your career, have had recent career changes, or you're navigating different languages, we're here to help you build confidence by discovering new tools, overcoming your fears to find your voice, and engaging in a thriving community. Enjoy today's episode.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Transformational Pathways. Today we have with us Sheila Oranch. Hi Sheila, welcome to our show.
Hi Anu, I am very happy to be here.
Thank you. I'm really excited to hear more about you. So Sheila, you have told me a lot of interesting things just before this interview got started, but for the sake of our audience, I think we will go over it again. Tell me a little bit more about yourself.
Well, I consider Toastmasters a lifeline through many life changes. Because I've been active in Toastmasters since 1974, I was one of the first female members in a Toastmasters club, and I was one of the first female club presidents in New York State. It's been interesting to see how Toastmasters has evolved over time. There were some very interesting and surprising consequences to incorporating women into Toastmasters that I don't think anyone had thought about. Prior to that, it seemed like Toastmasters was all men in suits. And in my part of North America, it was all white men in suits. Once women were admitted, members of Toastmasters started bringing their plumbers and people who weren't business executives, not just women, but all kinds of people. So having that one barrier broken seemed to break all the barriers. Economics, class, status, everything. It was just all shattered.
Wow. That's an amazing achievement. And I think I'm pretty sure you're very proud of having been one of the first women pioneers in Toastmasters.
I am. And surprisingly, someone who joined my local Toastmasters club several years ago also was one of the first women in Toastmasters way back when. She had not the continuous membership, but she came back to Toastmasters because she had achieved her PhD and realized that having focused so much on academics for all those years, she had lost the ability to communicate verbally. And she needed to do a presentation. So she came back to Toastmasters to prepare for that presentation at Harvard, and she hasn't left. So she's still with our club.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Now, you mentioned how when women started to join the club, it broke all barriers. Yeah?
Yes.
And more people from different walks of life started to come to Toastmasters because it was really meant for everyone. Not just working men or women, but really anyone who can benefit from communication skills, correct?
Yes.
Now, in some ways, or in many ways, that is symbolic of all aspects of life. When you open the doors for women and let them come to the table and speak, it breaks many barriers.
I'm going to look at it as a multifaceted concept that when you break any one barrier, it tends to break all the other barriers. And I don't know that it matters which is the entry point, but as soon as any self-contained homogenous group accepts any people who are different than they are, and perceptibly different. I mean, to me, nobody's different, but in these kind of homogenous groups, when they can accept anybody who is different than them in any meaningful way, all of a sudden different doesn't seem so scary. That's really important. Because today, more than ever, the world has no borders. Toastmasters has no borders. I'm very proud of that.
True. That's correct. Indeed, it is so. Um, Sheila, you mentioned how, coming into Toastmasters, breaking barriers. How has this affected you in your personal and professional life?
When I first joined Toastmasters, this is just a funny little story. I was 22 years old. My father told me about this new club that he was going to help start in our hometown. He described Toastmasters, and I said, "Oh, that sounds like fun. Can I come?" And he said, "No, it's all men." And I said, "That's not fair." And he said, "I know, I'm working on it." About a year later, when I went over to see my parents, my father said, "We're inducting our first female member next week. Would you like to come?" Being 23, "Why isn't it me?" He said, "Well, we need someone who is professional, dignified, and won't make the men feel threatened." I said, "Well, I get that." I understand that. I attended that meeting, and I gained my first professional female role model. As I like to say, she was everything I always wished I could be. She was tall, dignified, slender, dressed in a dove gray suit. She was soft-spoken but assertive. She didn't threaten the men. She took her space, but she didn't threaten anyone. Now, I never managed the tall, slender, dignified part, but I had learned over time to take my space without threatening other people. I joined Toastmasters primarily to learn how to perceive myself as an adult among adults. Because even though I was a single mother who had been married, earning my own keep, supporting myself, I still felt like a kid. I still didn't feel like an adult in a room of adults. That was the thing I wanted the most. The thing I gained of most value right away is that talking isn't communicating. If I was born talking, apparently, that came naturally. But if you're not able to listen and understand your audience and fairly exchange concepts and understanding, then you're not communicating. Toastmasters gave me that skill of active listening. I'll always be grateful for that.
I think a lot of us can learn a lot from what you just said, that speaking is not communication. And at Toastmasters, you are reminded that every single time you come to a meeting. Active listening, evaluating, being aware of yourself as you speak, being aware of your pauses, your punctuations, your filler words, and also being able to perceive how your listeners are taking it in is a heightened skill, right? It's not simple communication. I need to work on this. And I don't think it ever ends. Yeah. So there's definitely a lot of value in being a Toastmasters member and practicing your communication skills. Now, Sheila, you mentioned how it obviously helped you personally and professionally. And you joined in 1974, you said. Have you always been a member? Were there times when you took a break from Toastmasters?
I had one brief interval when I first moved to Boston, Massachusetts, until I found a Toastmasters club. So there was one 6-month period when I wasn't active, but as soon as I found another Toastmasters club, I rejoined and was active again. It just is part of my life. As I went through life's journey, I had many different kinds of life experiences, like a divorce, like being isolated. Toastmasters was the one place that I could go where I always was just accepted at face value, not judged by occupation or social status or how much money I had or anything else, but only my very presence. And what I like to say is that I'm addicted to applause. I'm addicted to people politely listening, not interrupting. One person talks at a time. I didn't really get that in my family life. That people applaud you because you're making the effort, because you're doing it. Certainly when you do a good job, when you give an effective presentation, the applause might be just a little bit more enthusiastic. But when someone gets up and does it, particularly when they're new, and most people are kind of terrified, anxious about what reception they're going to get, what we're applauding is we're applauding that you did it. You did it. That's the most important thing. Also, the thing that I'm addicted to is positive, constructive evaluations. I don't know any place else in life where I can go in and test drive a concept, a technique, a whole new topic, and get the kind of really constructive, supporting feedback that we get in Toastmasters. Because I'm an advanced speaker, I tell my evaluators, don't hold back. Don't just say, that was great, I don't have anything else to say, because that doesn't do me any good. It's not that I want them to be mean or hypercritical, but I really want to hear some ways that I could improve, particularly if it's a competition speech. That's the only way to get better. The evaluation techniques that we learn in Toastmasters are very applicable to everyday life, with family, with children, at work, in volunteer organizations, just anywhere. How can you help people challenge themselves and be better while still supporting them and letting them know that they're good at what they're good at? I love that. I'm just hooked on that.
Absolutely. And Sheila, over the years, what changes or transformations have you seen in the Toastmasters program? You mentioned you started as the only woman in the club, or the first woman in the club, to today,
Second.
second, to today, where, of course, all people, I mean, people from all walks of life come in. What
Yes.
kind of transformation have you seen over the years?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I'm going to tell a different story rather than answering that question directly, which is a table topics technique.
Go ahead.
Okay. Back in the 1980s, a member of my then Toastmasters club, Nancy, asked if I would help organize a Toastmasters club in the women's prison. There's only one correctional facility devoted to women in Massachusetts, the state prison. We went in, and that's a whole story in itself, like the feeling when you go into prison, even if you're not a prisoner. Every 2 weeks for 2 years, I went to jail. There I really met people from so many different situations in life. The people who attended the club faithfully and did the projects that we do in Toastmasters achieved so much personal growth. It's statistically noted that when people in prison, not just in this particular club, participate in a Toastmasters club, the recidivism rate, the rate of going back to jail, goes from 80% to 20%. That's a pretty consistent statistic. I learned from that experience that there isn't anyone in any circumstance of life who cannot benefit from learning better communication skills. What they learned was how to express their feelings rather than acting out. They learned how to be appropriate and effective when they went to the parole board. to those hearings, or when they had to go to court, or when they had to meet with a lawyer or a career counselor. In every single instance, they learned all the things that we learn in Toastmasters: how to listen effectively, analyze your audience, respond appropriately to the situation, and to express themselves. A lot of times people get in trouble because they have feelings or they have ideas or they're not comfortable with a situation. They don't know how to express themselves. They don't know how to appropriately get attention to what their needs are. They end up acting out and getting in trouble. That doesn't really answer the question that you asked. How have I seen Toastmasters evolve over the years?
Well, actually, while you didn't directly answer my question, you have shared a story or a narrative that is very, very, very interesting to me, and I'm sure to our audience, right? Because this is the first time I'm hearing about anyone going to a prison to teach the inmates public speaking, and that's something unusual for a lot of us. So my question to you, Sheila, is what were some of your apprehensions before you went there?
That's a really good question. I don't think I had apprehensions before I went there. Volunteers or anyone who's going to go in goes to a series of orientation classes. I thought that I was prepared. But when I actually walked in, and you have to leave all your personal things in the guard station so they don't get stolen or lost or anything. When those doors closed, and it's like this, like these big metal doors clang shut behind you, I had an instinctive fear of being trapped, and that once they got me in, they wouldn't let me out. I don't know about you, but I have not led a perfect life. I was not blameless. I certainly had gotten into enough mischief when I was a young person. There's always that feeling that, well, if they ever knew who I really was, they wouldn't let me out either. But I got over that pretty quickly and realized that even though many of these people had a rough life, one little fact there that might make it seem a little bit easier to understand is because this was the only prison for women in Massachusetts, everyone was in there, from people who wrote bad checks to murderers. It wasn't like a white collar prison or a maximum security prison. It was everybody who ever got convicted of anything prison. Some of the people that I dealt with were just like so bewildered and terrified for themselves, being put in with people who they perceived as being dangerous criminals. A lot of them ended up where they were because they made poor choices about who they were with. Like if there was a drug bust and they happened to be in that house, they weren't the dealer. They just were collateral damage, but they still got locked up because they were there. So it was more circumstantial than them intentionally doing anything wrong. Mm-hmm. It was a slice of life and a real lesson about how choose your friends wisely, for one thing, and how bad things can happen to good people. But for me, at first there was some anxiety. And the first time that I was the only mentor going into the club by myself, and it was a cold winter evening, and it was dark, and I needed to walk across that great big courtyard all by myself, I have to say that I had some anxiety. Or when you know how in a high school, when the bell rings at the end of class and everybody runs out in the hall and runs to their classroom, when everybody ran from one activity to another. I'm a short person, you can't tell it on the video, but I'm only about 5 feet tall. I'm not really comfortable with crowds of big people running past me. So I would just find a radiator in the hallway and park myself behind the radiator and wait until the crowd died down. Just my way of experiencing the world. It was exciting and Very, very fulfilling. I still use the counter checklist that one of the women created. She drew it. It's got little cartoons on it. It lists out all the different ums and kinds of word fillers that people could use. I keep a stash of those, and when we have a new member who's going to be the counter for the first time, I give them a copy of that to use because it's so beautiful.
Wonderful. You mentioned how it helped them, obviously, in their public speaking, being part of Toastmasters and having their speeches listened to and evaluated. But have you seen any kind of change come over them from being a part of Toastmasters?
Oh, yeah. Certainly. When a person is truly listened to, this is so rare in life that anyone truly listens to you. When a person has a room full of people genuinely listening to them, responding, applauding, giving constructive feedback, they get so much confidence. You can see them blossom like that little flower that finally gets some water and sunshine. See them coming week after week and going from, shuffling in like, oh my God, do I have to be here, to like they couldn't wait and competing with each other to get to be the Toastmaster for the next meeting, to do a task, lead the meeting, give a speech. That's astonishing. While I'm at it, my other favorite thing in Toastmasters is the youth leadership program. Youth leadership is a program of 6 to 8 weeks for young people 15 to 18 years old. They learn all the skills of public speaking, leadership, parliamentary procedure, how to lead a meeting, how to be an officer, all those skills in just 2 months. What I like to say is that teenagers will do in 6 weeks what it takes an adult 2 years to do. Mm-hmm. They're already in learning mode. Even if they don't want to be there when they first start, most of the time they're happy. By the third meeting, they are running and organizing their own meetings, and we're just mentoring them. It's amazing to see how they blossom from someone who can't even say their name and look you in the eye to someone who's competing to be able to give the speech at the graduation ceremony, which they have to organize themselves. It's amazing.
Tell me a little bit more about the youth leadership program. How does one avail of it?
How what?
How can someone join that program?
Well, it's a self-contained package like Speechcraft is for adults that Toastmasters has. Any club can sponsor a youth leadership program. You need to have at least one coordinator, one member of the club who's coordinating the program. There's a series of projects and agendas for each meeting. The youth, well, I've had them come from scout troops, Ys, YMCA and YWCA, 4-H groups, schools. I would go to the school and say, here's this program. Would you like to do an after-school program? The club sponsors it. It should be free to the teenagers, to the kids. And then you recruit, the coordinator recruits members to go in and give sample speeches and sample evaluations and be the general evaluator in all the roles of a meeting just to show them how to do it. But as I said, by the third meeting, they're doing everything themselves and you're just applauding them and listening carefully and giving them constructive feedback like you would any Toastmaster. They just take with it and they run with it. It's terrific. I love to do it. I volunteer in Manhattan, in northern Manhattan, with Growth and Development Services that provides free mental health services to youth in underserved communities. It's one of the reasons I joined Harlem Toastmasters, because I wanted a club that was near the youth program. In the summer, we do a youth leadership program with them as part of the New York City summer youth employment program. I'm so happy to be able to do it. I see youths who honestly can't even let their whole face be on camera. They go from that to reporting back to us that at school in their speech class, they gave a 10-minute speech. When they go from can't even say their name out loud to giving a 10-minute speech, what do you think that is going to do for them, for their life? What impact is that going to have?
Right. So, Sheila, thank you so much for sharing that information. I'm sure it's very useful to our audience. You've been here for a long time, and you have definitely gained a lot of experience. You've helped a lot of people. What are your plans for the next year in Toastmasters?
I'm going to win the international speech contest.
You absolutely.
Well, I'm usually not how should I say this? It's easy for me to help other people achieve their goals. That's my personality. I'm a booster. This year I made it to the division contest in international and came in second. I understand why, because I got really good feedback. It's just a way to challenge myself that the things that you need to do and learn, the effort that you have to make to perfect your presentation techniques to win at that level will make me a better speaker for the causes and charities that I care about. That's one goal. The other is to bring the youth leadership program to more communities. It's not easy to get into a school because they have so much going on, and you have to have a teacher who's the champion for the program, who's committed to be there or have someone there for you for every meeting. But it's something that can help them so much that I can't help myself. I have to do it. We already have a prison club going in New Hampshire, so I don't have to work on that. But this is just my thing. I never forgot being a teenager, being a young person, and not being listened to, not being heard, being treated as something like a puppy or a kitten, and not a thinking, caring human being who had opinions. I want the young people to gain their voice. I want them to be heard, because that's how we're going to change the world. Those are my two big goals in Toastmasters.
I wish you all the best, because those are mighty powerful goals.
Thank you.
I think, some of these things resonate very deeply with me too. I tried to bring Toastmasters, or I brought up the idea of Toastmasters with my son's school. My son is 10, so he's in elementary school. And I try to bring it up, but I think, like you mentioned, they are full. They have a plate that's full of activities, and their curriculum is kind of tight. So the school politely declined it. But I do see the value, and he's only in elementary school, but I definitely see the value in younger people, kids, teenagers, the value they will get out of Toastmasters and a public speaking program, and making them more effective communicators, not just because they will be listened to, but they will also learn to listen to. Because I don't believe anyone taught me as a kid to listen to. Oh yeah, we are told to listen to, but that's not the same as listening to someone, truly listening to someone, right?
That's right.
Yeah. So thank you. Thank you for sharing your goals with us. I'm very confident that you'd achieve it, given how motivated you are and how positive your outlook is. Now, what is your message to our audience in terms of joining Toastmasters? Why do you think they should join Toastmasters?
My message is, and always has been, if something is holding you back in life, then address learning the tools and techniques that are going to help you overcome that. We're going to call it a stepping stone. It's not really a stumbling block or a speed bump. Every speed bump is a stepping stone to success. All the buts, all the reasons why you can't do something, that's just your to-do list. Even if something is scary or difficult, that's probably because you don't know enough about it to know that you can do it. We see people come into our Toastmasters Club all the time who are terrified. I mean, going into the bathroom and throwing up before giving their first speech. Really shaky. No one laughs at them. No one mocks it. We all applaud that you took that first step. And we know that you're going to get better. So Toastmasters is the way to make the number one fear among adults less scary in a safe, loving, supportive environment. And you'll never know unless you try. After all, being a guest at a Toastmasters meeting is free.
That's great.
So you might as well try it and see. You might make some of your best friends in life there.
True. Thank you, Sheila, for sharing your words of wisdom with our audience. And I wish you even greater success for you to break more barriers.
And I thank you for inviting me and being such a good host. Keep doing that, because the more people understand the value and accessibility of Toastmasters. By the way, we have everything in Braille also. And now it's all online. Let's not forget, very accessible. Mm-hmm. That there's no reason why you shouldn't succeed. If you go on Google and put in the phrase famous Toastmasters, you will get 3 million hits. And you will see people who you admire, who you never knew had gone through the Toastmasters program. Could be you.
Who knows? I need to search that as soon as we finish this call.
Hmm?
Thank you, Sheila. This was a pleasure.
Thank you so much for joining us on Transformational Pathways. If you enjoyed today's episode or got anything out of it, please rate, review, and subscribe. And if you're interested in learning more about Toastmasters District 46, check out the link in the show notes below.